has that Baltimore defense changed since week 4, especially with Marcus Peters now there?
It was personnel-wise. Williams didn't play up front. He tried to warm up before the game and then couldn't go. 2 corners, Smith, who comes in their nickel package, who's been a starter for them, trading for Peters. They lost Jefferson, so Clark plays all the time now at safety, carries the green dot, so that's who they communicate with. Linebacker-wise, Bynes. And I can't think of the other young man that used to be here, but I think, is with them now. So personnel-wise has changed. I haven't watched a lot of what they do on offense, but obviously they must be playing with a lot of confidence. So you look at scores that are up in games fast, early. So they're playing with certainly a swagger ahead, which is, again, it makes it a lot easier to call plays on either side of the ball when you're moving it or you're stopping people and just to let it rip. So obviously they're playing with a lot of confidence, pressure you a lot, haven't changed a lot in that manner. We controlled the first game from start to finish in terms of being able to run the football, didn't get behind. So we didn't see a lot of their pressure packages per se that they have in these other games when they've been up. Now it turns into where you're in 2-minute, no huddle a lot, and then you get into a lot of their pressure packages.
So with that, how much has your offense improved since that first game? It doesn't necessarily look like, the first time you played Baltimore?
Well, that game was, I think we had over 500 yards and played awfully well. And again, every game is, like I always say, you can't carry over points or statistics. So what we did then or what we did last week has some bearing to this week, but not nearly as much as how we practice and how we prepare for this game.
I don't mean necessarily get 500 yards, but that was early in the season. How would you assess the progress of your offense from the 4th week of the season till now?
In some ways, I think we've improved. It may not be to the naked eye, but there's certain things I do believe we are doing better. But probably hard to see because it's hard to say that based on, like I said, when we had such an explosive day, I think is the best way to put it, because we had a number of explosive plays. I think they turned Ricky loose on a seam, and Jarvis broke about 5 tackles for a big play before half, and then Nick had that back-breaking long run after they cut it to 1 score. So, but again, there's some things I think that we've done well and we've done better.
Like what?
I think we've been more consistent in terms of throwing the football. It may not show that. For the most part, we've cut down on the turnovers and the penalties since then. In terms of, like I said, for the most part, we went probably that first half of the year turning it over, more than we'd like, for a number of reasons. And then penalty-wise, I think we've cut down on that.
Rushing still, he's not a guy that likes to talk about himself. So I'll ask you about him. What have you been impressed the most about him this year?
Well, first off, he doesn't talk, so it's not just about himself. He's a pretty quiet young man, just a really good football player. I don't think if you went around the building and asked people about Nick Chubb, I think it'd be very difficult to find, someone to say a negative thing about him. He's a really good football player, works awfully hard, and one of our leaders by example, I think is the best way to put it.
Obviously he's doing a lot well, but what are some of the things he could work on and become an even better pro?
I think the biggest thing, and he does work at it, I think just his ball skills and route running, I think he's going to continue to develop. I think, he's a natural downhill running back, and that's probably the easiest thing for him, and that's obvious to see. It's nothing that you haven't seen. Just the consistency in his route running and ball skills.
Ask about one of my pet peeves, and I'm not asking it to be smart, but actually to learn the process of how you guys arrive at the decision to defer when you're playing the 32nd ranked defense in the league in Arizona. What goes through the discussion about deferring the quarterback?
You'd have to ask Freddie. We really don't have a discussion on it. If you're asking our discussions, we don't really have a discussion on it. At least I don't with Freddie. I've had those discussions in the past, and you do go through some of the things, and I'm sure in his mind he does. You'd have to ask Freddie, though.
There's times, maybe more times than there should be, when the huddle breaks and a receiver will run to the wrong side and Baker will have to grab him and tell him to go the other way. Is that frustrating, or is that normal and it just seems like it stands out and like it shouldn't be happening this late in the season?
It's frustrating.
Why do you think it's so?
Well, again, it's obviously it falls on us as coaches, falls on the players, falls on all of us to obviously get the play in, hear it clearly in the huddle. It all starts with alignment and assignment, because that gets you beat before any mismatches, whoever you play. If you're not getting lined up and you don't know what you're doing, it doesn't matter who you play. You won't be consistent. You'll be choppy with what you do. So it is frustrating, because then you put Baker up against it in terms of the clock and trying to get us in the right protection and those kind of things. So it has been frustrating, and it lends yourself to be choppy, lends yourself into burning timeouts when you don't need them and taking penalties when you don't have to. So again, it's something that has been an issue and something we've tried to correct.
And you mentioned Brandon Williams. How much of a difference does he make?
What's that?
You mentioned Brandon Williams.
Just gives them another big body inside, makes it hard to run. You know, it doesn't mean they don't have other good players. You know, with Pearson there and Worley, you get them in their base personnel, and it's just very hard to move those guys. It's hard to create space. So, you know, and he's been a good football player for a while now. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, just consistency. Hard to move, and so it'll be a real challenge for us.
Don't spend a lot of time watching the Baltimore offense, but have you seen enough to get a real appreciation for what Lamar's been able to do this year, and just what stands out to you the most as being kind of most impressive?
I really haven't. What we don't watch a lot of them, because when you decide what games to break down for an opponent, you try to pick out games recently or like your offense. So for us, a lot of times it doesn't fit, other than if you're looking for explosive plays or things that they happen to do. So we don't use their offense very often in our cut-ups, other than, you know, so it's unfair, because usually what I see is, I don't know, the highlights or something. So it all looks good. They're showing all the highlights of all their big plays. So hard for me to say exactly. Obviously, they must be playing well.
You don't think about this much while you're in the moment, but in terms of where he is as a second-year player and some of the things he can add to his game to improve himself as a, trying to get to be one of the league's better quarterbacks, what are some of the things that you would identify him needing to work on to take another step?
Well, again, I think there's every player that we have, it's a work in progress. I think you're always trying to improve in certain areas of your game. That's at all positions. I think the first thing, and I've talked about it a bunch, that I think will help us, and then I'll get to Baker here, is just our consistency in terms of how we do things and how we route run and getting to right spaces. That 100%, I believe, leads to consistency on offense, is 11 players playing consistently and doing the right things over and over and over. And part of that is breaking the huddle, getting lined up, and that is a big part of it. So it's all of those things that lead to a player playing with confidence. And then with him, it's, okay, take it from there. Obviously, at this point, we've had the ability to run the football, which is usually a very good thing. It allows you to, stay in front of the chains, which we have the last few weeks, which has helped us on third downs. And then from there, then you're not always throwing it because you're behind, so your protection is better. That allows the quarterback to stand in the pocket without feeling like he's under duress, which I think has been better the last few weeks. And I think that's one thing that he has tried to work on, which is hanging in the pocket, working through his progressions, I think is probably, and there's a lot that goes into that. So I always say that with confidence, timing, protection, that leads a quarterback to, because if you're getting hit, if guys are off their mark, the timing is thrown off, then it's very difficult for a quarterback to gain those confidence and to improve.
Odell only having 2 touchdown catches at this point in the season. Could you guys and should you guys have, if you could turn back the clock, gotten him the ball, gotten him into the end zone more touchdown catches by Odell Beckham Jr.? And do you see that the future can be bright for him and Baker in terms of scoring the football?
Sure. I think that I don't have in front of me what statistics as to how much we've thrown it to him. I know there was a time where we hadn't targeted him, but we have more as it's gone along. Again, I don't really look at it that way. But I do think there's, sometimes there's opportunities that present itself we haven't taken advantage of, and sometimes it just hasn't come up. Twice, I don't know, we hit a post, I think, against the Steelers in the first drive. He was in, then he wasn't in. Okay, to me, that led to a touchdown that didn't count as that. Last week, the last drive of the game, he gets stopped on the 1-yard line, and it's right there. I kind of look at, there's a lot of times just him being in the red zone, he attracts a lot of attention that helps for other players. It's the same as on the one end of, hey, Nick Chubb or some running backs got a lot of touchdowns rushing. It's got to come from somewhere. Sometimes it's a running back, sometimes it's quarterback sneak, sometimes it's a receiver. But I don't see it. And sometimes it's a player that, is fighting through. So I think all the above. But whether or not how often he scores, I really don't. I don't think of it that way. Would we like him to score more? Sure, all of our skill guys. We want to score more. But I've never thought about how many times an individual player scores. I've thought about what the matchups are that give us the best chance to score when we get down there, if that makes sense. Now, if that happens to be him in a certain matchup, then great. If not, then it just works out that way. We're not purposely, in my mind, trying to make sure that he scores. Otherwise, I think we're doing a disservice to trying to score every time we have it down there.
At least one time where you were the offense was in the situation of having Carlson try to pick up Chandler Jones. In other times, it's been Farrell Brown, whoever it is. As you look back on it, that just seems to have been such a void. The guy to pick up their number one pass rusher when the tackle needs help.
No, there's no doubt that you try to shrink your margin for error and not put tight ends or running backs on special pass rushers. You're exactly right. You're not trying to have that occur. At times in your play action game, it's very difficult to always do that if you really want to sell the run. So that comes into play at times, and I'm not speaking specifically to Chandler. Sometimes you're expecting receivers to be in a certain spot. It's more of a rhythm throw, so you're not asking him to protect or a running back to protect for an extended period of time. It just happens to work out that way. But without a doubt, if you do that too often, you're gonna get sacked, you're gonna get hit, and your quarterback's gonna get hurt. So we certainly, at least we have, in terms of talking protection beats coverage. So every week we're talking about trying to not put ourselves in that position. Like what happened last week. It did, the first sack that we had. I think it was Demetrius Harris. We were, running a little bit of a roll, and we were expecting the ball to get out, and Jarvis got held up, and he didn't hold up as long as we were hoping. And it led to a sack, which isn't good, because then it puts you behind the sticks, and we ended up punting, went 3 and out.
Responded this week to being benched?
We've been out there one day. He's been fine. It's like all of our players and all of us coaches. It's we have a job to do, and the bottom line is we're paid to do a job no matter what our record is, what our status is. I'm sure it's frustrating for him to have been hurt and come back, and with where we're at. Every player wants to play. Every player wants to showcase his skill set. But ultimately, we are also in charge of, in our minds, putting the best players on the field that give us the best chance to win. And if we don't do that, then we're not being true to ourselves. We're being true to something else that doesn't exist. And the bottom line is, who we put on the field, we think, gives us the best chance to win. And he has responded well. And I thought he had a good practice yesterday.